right, good afternoon. First up, I want to give a big thanks for being able to be here on stage to Xavier and Amanda for trusting me to be here today. And yeah, with that out of the way, I'm Mark Roth. I'm a full-stack developer and open source contributor. And I love open source. I love to give gifts. I love to work on Hotwire. And I have been working on adjacent projects like Stimulus, Reflex, and Cape already over the years. And I've been on and off maintaining Stimulus, not as much anymore in the last few years, though. But I love Ruby, and I want to keep Ruby and Rails as attractive as possible for people to get started with. As I've been working with Hotwire over the years, I have been teaching at boot camps, have been mentoring early career engineers, and also been helping businesses get Hotwire adopted in their applications. And there has been a lot of feedback in regards of lack of feedback and lack of tooling. And that's also why here on this stage 2 years ago, I was talking about the ecosystem at large, but I was also releasing the Stimulus LSP, which helps people to find errors in their view templates, especially when it comes to undefined controllers, but also helping you with getting autocomplete for these data action attributes. The problem was that this is only HTML. It wouldn't work for ERB in the sense that it wouldn't work for ActionView tag helpers or the ERB helpers you might have in your application. So what works on these kind of templates, it wouldn't work on those kinds of templates, where you have tag.help, tag.diff, content tag, and so on. So we were missing the support for these tag helpers. There was no tooling. And so we also kind of outlined this in the talk, and I had this point on the slide, where we were saying we want to add a triple LSP as well, but also make sure that as soon as Ruby's LSP kind of supports that as well. So in these few cases that I had, and a few other ones kind of led me to think about maybe we need a better ERB parser that also is HTML aware. So I want to tackle the bigger picture. And that's what I was able to do in the Ruby Kaigi talk early this year in Japan. I wanted to kind of show what we can do with a ERB parser. And then later at RailsConf this year as well, I kind of showed what we can do with this now in terms of tooling. And today I want to talk about how we can use this to render ERB as well. So going back to Ruby Kaigi, I introduced Herb. Herb is a HTML-aware ERB parser and ecosystem specifically built for HTML and ERB files. It's an ecosystem of tools. It's mostly set out as a parser, linter, and formatter. And as we have been building this, we have been adding more and more tools to kind of help support this vision. The most important piece is the parser, which I have been talking about in the talk itself. But to kind of recap from that talk, it is a HTML-aware ERB parser. It's written in C. It's built on Prism for processing the ERB in the Ruby in the ERB, and it's designed for tooling. So what it gives you is an interleaved syntax tree of HTML and embedded Ruby. So we have structural awareness of the files. I like to kind of show this example here, where we have this if and some HTML in the middle. What a regular ERB parser would see in this case would be the ERB tag, some text, and then some ERB tag again. But it wouldn't kind of connect the dots that this is a combined statement. So the if is being closed with that ends at the end. And that's what Herb allows us to kind of capture. It has the information about the opening tag, the closing tag at the end, so we can kind of enclose these elements inside of it, and the HTML element itself is contained within it. And with that, we have the hierarchy and everything we need to kind of build out advanced tooling. So that was the parser. It's running, it's built in C, so it's running in the browser. It's running in Ruby for a C extension. It's running in Node.js and JavaScript. So it's really kind of versatile of how you might be able to use this. So at RailsConf, I was talking about HTML ERB template in general, but also the vision that we could now build having these tools available. And this doesn't come without its issues, like the Rails view layer in general. We have been seeing a lot of friction in these kind of areas in the view layer, especially around like reusability, but also the complexity in front-end logic, or also around the tooling. So I kind of showed in that talk that we have a new herb formatter now, which is a HTML-ERB formatter. So what you can do with this is you can give it any string of HTML-ERB, save your file or run the CLI, and it will format the code for you automatically. And this is built into the editor, so you can save the file, and it will just snap right in as it should be. Since it's aware of all the surroundings, it's super accurate and super fast. Then we have the linter, which helps you kind of catch common mistakes, kind of enforce best practices, so you can see that these tools just work with HTML-ERB as well. Recently, we also shipped a new kind of set of rules that is aware of these conditions, so it is able to detect if you are maybe rendering an ID twice on a page, which is not technically valid HTML. These offenses are also shown in the CLI if you run it. They are nicely annotated with syntax highlighting, and it's super easy to pinpoint what's wrong about it. Since RailsConf, we shipped 80 new linter rules, 9 of which are focused on accessibility, which makes now a total of 32 rules that the linter supports. Then in the same kind of realm, we have now a stimulus lint package too, which is specifically for stimulus rules, which we are shipping today. So the stimulus LSP had these diagnostics built into the language server, but they weren't really accessible outside of it. And stimulus lint extracts those now using herb, and it can now run these diagnostics independently. It's built using the stimulus parser project and is now using herb going forward. So we are going to have a stimulus LSP update very soon, so you can also get annotations on ERB tag helpers. Similarly, we want to explore what's possible to have turbo lint rules, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if there's too much to get there, but it's something to explore. Another thing that's quite common in the front-end ecosystem is the use of Tailwind, obviously. But they have this prettier plugin for automatically sorting the classes. So I've been working on one that integrates with the herb formatter as well. So when you add a Tailwind class to your HTML element and save the file, it will sort them according to the order that they recommend in the docs. This will also work for both ERB tag helpers and regular HTML, which is super convenient. That's coming also very soon. I hope to ship this within the next month. Then we have the vision that I was sharing at RailsConf for the ERB rendering engine. The idea here is that we want to take the current string-based template engine and transform it into a HTML templating engine. What it means is that we want to have an engine that cannot produce invalid HTML because it just enforces it. So if you have regular ERB today and you give it this kind of template here where you have a missing end tag at the end, and you ask ActionView today to compile this using the template, it will do that for you because it hasn't any understanding of ERB and HTML, I mean. What we could do with an engine that is aware of it, we could say that if you give it the same templates and we try to compile this using this time the herb handler, that it will kind of throw and say, I cannot compile this because it's not valid HTML. That's what I want to talk about today, how we can kind of implement this to make this work. So the Rails view layer has been pretty much the same since it was released in 2004. It hasn't really changed too much. It's still somewhat the same, which is not a bad thing. It's really good that we have this consistent thing you can rely on. Back then, it launched as part of Action Pack, so it kind of completed the MVC story in Rails. And even back then, it was using ERB, or embedded Ruby for short. But even then, it was templates in text files with sprinkles of Ruby embeddings. And today, ActionView ships with eRuby as the engine. And ERB is here to stay. It's not going anywhere, and so is ActionView. But maybe we can kind of look what we can do to make it better, kind of how we can level it up by keeping it Railsy. So I want to kind of check what we can do with ActionView if we kind of reimagine how it works, maybe try to re-engineer some of the parts to make it more flexible and more like refactor some of the stuff maybe, and optimize some things. But also, let's see if we can make it somehow reactive. So you need less and less JavaScript. And that's kind of the idea of this ReActionView initiative. The idea here is that we have an initiative to explore what we can do in the view layer in this year and beyond. So the design goals are to be backwards compatible, obviously. We want to improve the developer experience. We want to embrace web standards and see if we can integrate with other frameworks too, if possible. Over the last few years, we have seen a lot of improvements of the web platform in general, including web components, import maps, or also the PWAs. In CSS, we have been seeing a lot of awesome improvements too, like container queries, CSS nesting, and now even functions. In the web APIs, we have the new view transient API, the popovers, and even now the super powerful invoker commands. And if you look at today how we have a server-side rendered app on the left-hand side with Rails and some HTML over the wire, compared to a client-side rendering app with a Rails API and a single-page app, they are very far apart. There's no middle ground. And people choose to use client-side rendering if they want high fidelity, if they want to reuse or use existing component libraries, or even have a bunch of engineers already. Hotwire is great. It is simple. It gets the job done in most of the cases. But if you want to have something more ambitious, it's super hard to go from Hotwire to fully high dynamic. So the transition is really hard. There's not really an on-ramp to go from the left side to the right side. And that's why some teams today begin a new project directly in SPAs because they don't feel like that ActionView is powerful enough. And that's kind of a mistake in my opinion because I think that's giving away most of what makes Rails great, what's so productive. So I want to kind of check out what we can do to close the gap to make sure it's coming closer together. I want to see where we can go with this. So I have a new release today, which is Herb's 07. And Herb, this new version of Herb ships a new ERB engine. This ERB engine is HTML aware, and it can render ERB. It is designed to be ERB engine compatible, so you can use the same interface to call ERB. So let's compare them. If you use ERB engine today and give it templates, this time we have an actual closing tag. What it will use is a regex to figure out the dynamic pieces of that template. So we have a string, we have Ruby, and another string. And it transforms this to call add text, add expression for these individual pieces. And what this gives us is a compiled template. In this case, it's a little bit of format and simplified. But we have a buffer, and we kind of shuffle strings into it, or Ruby method returns into the buffer. With Herb, if we now have these templates, the same templates, we can now parse these templates, and we get a syntax tree of that same template. I will compact this a little bit so you can see it better. We have an HTML element node, we have an opening node, we have the body of the elements, and some a close tag. Now we can strategically visit this tree to kind of visit all these nodes, and we can do this using a Herb visitor to kind of build a compiler to compile this syntax tree into a compiled template. So if you implement these methods, in this case we have the element node here. In this case we just want to visit all these individual nodes. The element node itself doesn't have any content, but it holds the references to these other nodes. So we have the opening tag, and in here we can say, let's visit all these tokens that we have and take the values of those and call add text on them. For the text nodes, it's just text content, so we can just call add text for that too. And for the ERB tags, we can check if the tag opening is an output tag, and if it is, call add expression, otherwise call add code. And if you kind of compact this back out of this visitor, that's what it's going to call in sequence. And if you compare this to what eRuby does, it's not quite the same. It's more verbose, right? But if you kind of change what add text and add expression is under the hood, if you kind of collect them in an array first and kind of collect all of those, we get something like this, where you have the tokens and the type that they have inside of them. If you look at those now, we see we have a bunch of consecutive text tokens. So we can kind of, before we compile the templates, compact them into one individual token. And then we have something very similar to eRuby. And if we now try to compile this again, it will produce pretty much the same output. So if we handle all these different node types that Herb has, we end up with almost the same compiled templates. So what we can do now with this, we can plug this into Rails and change the default from eRuby to Herb, just for testing purposes. Since this is API compatible, we can, in ActionView, change the eRuby engine handler to use Herb. And then on the handler itself, autoload also Herb, and then change the default from eRuby to Herb as well. So if you run our application now and open it in the browser, it renders. So this is now all running on the Herb parser, the Herb compiler, and renders this using Herb, which is super exciting. The cool thing here is that it gives us all the advantages the Herb parser gives us, which means we're not able to produce invalid HTML. So we ensure we have valid HTML and valid syntax, and change it from being a string template engine to be a HTML templating language engine. And this gives us valuable feedback also in our editor now, because what's running in your editor here is the same parser and engine that's actually rendering and compiling the template at the end. So this is very much accurate, more accurate than what we would have if that's not the case. Which also makes it more instant because you can just run it in your editor and see that something is wrong about it without even trying to open it in the browser and see something is wrong. But since we have all this understanding now, we can do a lot of cool things with that. So let's improve how Rails renders error messages. Today, if you kind of have an error in your syntax error in your templates, it will just give you the whole template and saying something is wrong in here, figure out where. And that's not really helpful. So let's see how we can do that, improve that. The Herb parser knows where this is. It can pinpoint it exactly. And we already do this in the linter, so we can see where something is wrong about it. So let's bring this back into the browser. And when the browser is being opened and trying to request it from the server, we now show exactly where something is wrong in the templates, which makes it very much easier to debug what's wrong about it. And since we're dealing with HTML.erb, we can also do more things with it. So we can also check for invalid HTML, saying if we have nested p tags, which are not valid HTML, we can add a warning for that too. Since it's just a warning, we can dismiss those. And if we dismiss them, we can still see the rendered content in the background. Another nice thing about ActionView is this config called annotate rendered view files names, which adds these comments at the top and the bottom between the view files. The problem is that we cannot really style these elements or these comments in visually. But our compiler already knows how to render HTML elements and attributes. So what if we just inject additional attributes in development? So instead of rendering comments, we render data attributes onto these elements since we know where they are in the document. And if we add some CSS to it using an outline, what we get is a very nice outline of these view files to have the boundaries where these elements are, these templates are rendered. Since we have views, we have partial, we have components, we can add a type to that to kind of differentiate them. So when you have a page with a lot of components, we can see them color-coded for views, partial, and components. If we now also kind of add the relative path within the project, we can also say on hover on these labels, we show the full path. And if we add the full path to that element too, we can click on these labels, and it will open it right in your editor where this view is defined. Since it's an outline and there are HTML elements and attributes, this doesn't interrupt the natural flow. so it shouldn't change any layout at all. This is immensely helpful for debugging and finding out where stuff is defined in your app. So can we do the same for ERB output tags as well? And obviously the answer is yes. So if you have dynamic content on the page, you have this toggle now on the right side. I will enlarge this one more time. So what you can see here, you see the full outlines of all the dynamic pieces on this page. And this is really helpful to see what is actually being rendered and how it's being rendered. We have another option for showing the content even on hover. So if you hover over these elements, you see what this actually is being rendered as. And you guessed it, you can also click on them. And if you click on them, it will open the file, the location, and the line right in your editor where this is defined. There's one more nice mode, which is for enabling all of them on the same page, which is not as helpful, but it's still kind of interesting to see how a page is kind of set up. So what is next? We have outlined these 6 adoption levels at the RailsConf talk, and what we are shipping today is the first 2 levels of those. If you go into your Rails app today, run bundle add ReActionView, and run the generator, it will generate a initializer. And if you say intercept ERB true and run your servo again, you will get this out of the box without any more configuration. And you have all these tools built in. And obviously, this is just the beginning. I think this gives us a good idea what we can do. So just give it a shot, see how it works in your apps, and please report anything that might look weird. Then the next point would be to look if you can optimize stuff inside ActionView itself now that we have all this introspection. There are some ideas here to inline partial render calls, maybe inline some ActionView tag helpers and more. But this needs more exploration, and I'm not sure if that's really viable. The one more thing that we can do is also try to take inspiration from Phoenix Live View, and there are Heeks templates. If we know about these templates now, we can check out, we can track state and see before and after what changed, and only render the relevant pieces in the template, so you don't have to render the whole template every time. The one more thing you can do here then too is say, if you limit this ERB you're using in your view, we might be able to do something similar that React does from bringing the client components to the server side. We can do the other way around to say we can maybe bring some ERB components to the client side. Maybe by transpiling them to web components, transpile them to React components, or something similar. This should help with optimistic UI updates and might also improve offline functionality that we also heard from Rosa today. And then the final step would maybe be to see if we can integrate external components too from third-party packages if we don't want to abandon HTML altogether. But you only want to have on certain pages use React components or Svelte components or Vue components. The idea is here that we do something similar to what import maps Rails does, that we can say we register some of these components from, let's say, chat.cn or from a folder in your application. And by doing that and declaring that, the ReActionView context has idea about these components, and you can just use them in your regular ERB views. The engine would know that these are client-side components, would know how to deal with them, how to hide them, how to pass props around, and know how to deal with them, yeah. This is tightly integrated. This would be just working without any setup and would kind of bridge the gap between going fully server-side and going fully client-side. There are more ideas to explore. One of the issues is that people are saying I have a lot of one-off components, stimulus components, and people are often reaching for Alpine.js. The one thing I don't like about Alpine.js is the inline JavaScript you have to do in the attributes, which is kind of weird to me. So maybe we can explore something with inline stimulus as well. I think Svelte does this really nicely, where they have the script tags within the same component that is only scoped to this specific view file. So we might be able to do something similar to that. The same is true for CSS, so you might be able to do scoped CSS per view file. Vue.js actually does this. They have a style scoped. And what they do is, whenever they have the style scoped, they take all these CSS rules and then transform them using data attributes to kind of scope all these rules to the specific components so they don't leak in your whole app. We could also do selective rendering. This might be super useful for turbo frames. You say if you have a full view and you only say I want to render this ID reviews piece of that view, that you don't have to render everything around it because you can select specifically that element. But the idea here is just to bring more of these modern front-end ideas back to Rails, so there isn't really a need to abandon the Rails view layer and keep it the Rails way. ActionView has been really stable. There weren't too many breaking changes at all over the years, and it makes it super easy to build on. I think Rails shouldn't discourage the use of modern JavaScript. It should embrace it. And also embrace modern web standards. We have been seeing a lot of advancements in that area, so it would be super neat to just fit it in here. Provide good defaults, that's what Rails is known for, and have all these built-in options and migration paths that when you need more. So that the view layer scales the same way as the rest of the framework does in Rails, like active record with multiple databases. But again, this is just vision talk. But I think if we as a framework and community want to advance what we are doing, we need to explore what's possible. And new innovations require exploration. Even if none of this is actually viable in production, I think the outcome of this would be still valuable for the tooling and the ecosystem at large. So to conclude, the Prism parser had a really big effect on Ruby internals and Ruby tooling. And I think the same could be true for Herb and HTML templating and tooling as well. Herb started as a parser and is now an ecosystem of valuable tools. And ReActionView started as a vision to kind of show some of the shortcomings in the Rails view layer. And today it might just be an alternative rendering engine, but the belief it shows what's possible that we have these tools now. And we can push more boundaries to bring the web framework and the Rails framework forward, and that we can kind of hold up with the modern JavaScript stack so we don't have to write JavaScript in the end. And the teams don't have to abandon the beauty of ActionView. The community, the Ruby community in general, has built incredible tooling, and I think now it's time to bring that same care to the view layer. With Herb and ReActionView, I believe we have a path forward to level this up. And in the end, that's why I'm here, and that's why I love Ruby. I believe that the Herb engine provides a lot of valuable insights in what we can do. And I would love to see this in some way or form making it upstream into Rails. Rails has a super unique position as a full-stack framework, and I want to keep it as attractive as possible so people can enjoy building apps with Rails. Finally, I want to give a big thanks to all the people that have been supporting this journey so far, and all the people that have been contributing to the Herb repo directly. If you haven't already, please give her a star on GitHub or check out the docs. And also this new open source library called ReActionView on GitHub and the newly built docs site for that as well. So please try the tools, give feedback, report issues, and that's what I have for today.